program, so hopefully, yes. So as you heard, this meeting is being recorded. Just one bit of housekeeping before we get into everything. People are using the chat right now. We don't have the Q&A functionality set up, so we actually want to keep the chat for questions specifically to any of the panelists who are speaking. So while it's great that you people have been telling us where you're from and where you're zooming in from, for now, I'd like to stop that and to just reserve the chat for people to pose specific questions, especially to the ACLU. But anyway, hello everyone. Thank you for joining this urgent call from Fall of Freedom. This is an artist-specific Know Your Rights training, and we are holding in collaboration with the ACLU because people and artists are courageously resisting the drive towards fascism, and as part of that are standing up to ICE. Art is a powerful tool for looking at our world and imagining the world we want. We're so grateful to stand alongside of you during these challenging times and appreciate you continuing to show up for your communities. As I said, I'm Dread Scott. I'm a visual artist. My work shows in galleries and museums, but I'm also one of the initiators of Fall of Freedom. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that in a second, but first I want to tell you an overview, a rundown of what we're going to be doing this evening. After this rundown, I'm going to give you a brief, very, very brief introduction to the speakers. I'm largely just going to say their names. Then I'm going to give you an introduction to Fall of Freedom. What is Fall of Freedom? And then I'm going to introduce one of the frontline artists from Minneapolis who's going to talk about their work. Then after that, the ACLU will do the real presentation on knowing your rights, and there will be Q&A. Other artists from the front lines will then talk, and then there will be a wrap up. And so that's just sort of what we're going to be doing in this evening. As I'm going to say, there's a very brief introduction to the speakers. From the ACLU, we have Jonathan Blazer and Byul Yoon. They will be conducting the Know Your Rights training. And then we have 6 artists that are joining us in addition to myself. There's Isabelle Bourman, Favianna Rodriguez, Cannupa Hanska Luger, Patirsse Cullors, Cassils, and Rafa Esparze. And so if you can go up to the second slide, please. Fall of Freedom is an urgent call to the community, the arts community, to unite in defiance of authoritarian forces sweeping the nation. Why? What's at stake? Due process is gutted. Universities are threatened. Students are kidnapped. Migrants are deported. Troops are deployed. Racism is rampant. Cruelty is celebrated. Journalism is targeted. Foreign leaders are kidnapped. Police unleashed. Nazis are emboldened. And citizens are being murdered by ICE. As part of all of this, the arts are being assaulted. We've seen Jimmy Kimmel and Colbert thrown off the air. The Smithsonian is censoring shows. The Kennedy Center had their board kicked out and replaced and is now called the Trump Center. The NEA, PBS, and NPR have all had their funding slashed. This is fascism in America. Next slide, please. Artists are targeted because art matters, and artists are a threat to American fascism. We created Fall of Freedom last year because art matters and courage is indeed courageous. It's contagious. Beyond Fall of Freedom's effort, artists are really standing up. Bad Bunny, Bruce Springsteen, Tyler the Creator, Billie Eilish, Mark Ruffalo, and Natasha Lyonne are speaking out against ICE at the Golden Globes, the Grammys, and at the Super Bowl. And now I want to give you a brief overview of what Fall of Freedom has done and where we're planning to go in the future. There's a 2-minute film that I'd like to screen right now.
I'm in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, outside Epilogue Bookstore.
Art matters, and we are courageous people. Artists always are.
It is our duty to fight for our freedom.
Over the next 2 days, there are going to be over 700 events across the country in 47 states.
America in 2025 is descending into fascism.
This is why we must all resist.
Artists across the country are pushing back. In a bold response, hundreds of theatres, museums, libraries and community spaces are joining forces for Fall of Freedom.
By clearly communicating that New York City stands behind every artist's voice, the city would send a strong message of solidarity to both the artists and institutions that champion them.
Fall of Freedom
is a nationwide act
of creative resistance.
We know that we need to fight fascism.
We need to stop fascism, and we need to stand up to censorship that supports fascism.
When we act together, our words cannot be silenced. And when we stand together, our freedom stands just a little bit taller.
Art matters. Courage is contagious.
Fall of Freedom.
And so Fall of Freedom is mobilizing people on May 1st. You can follow the link in the chat, which somebody will put in the chat very soon, I hope, for more information on how to participate in our May Day event. And you can also register on the website to receive our newsletter if you aren't already doing that. The focus of today, though, is not the arts mobilization on May 1st, but rather knowing your rights, rights specifically when documenting and encountering ICE or other law enforcement. It has only been a few weeks since federal agents shot and killed 37-year-old Alex Preddy after beating him in front of witnesses. This comes after federal agents shot and killed 37-year-old Renee Good in Minneapolis and 43-year-old Keith Porter Jr. in Los Angeles. ICE has shot and brutalized and terrorized countless others. They occupied Minneapolis with 3,000 troops to swarm the community. But that's only one side of the battle. Perhaps even more significant than this ICE terror is that Minneapolis showed up. They boldly said ICE out. They showed up in sub-zero temperatures. They protected their neighbors. They blew whistles. They did mutual aid. When ICE killed Renee Good and the government blamed her for her own killing, Minneapolis showed up stronger. When ICE killed Alex Preddy, Minneapolis showed up stronger again. Minneapolis called on the country to act, and we did. They showed how powerful defiance can push back against fascism, and now ICE is having to retreat. As important and as real as this victory is, we know that fascism is still consolidating. Recently, we have seen that the government is announcing that they will round up refugees, are giving ICE the power to enter their homes without a warrant, and threatening war on Iran, and much, much more. Defiant artists are facing specific challenges now. Victor Marca 27, Quinones, has had his show canceled at the University of Texas for anti-ICE art. Palestinian artist Samia Halabi had a retrospective of her work canceled by Indiana University, her alma mater, and country musician Zach Bryan is being targeted for his anti-ICE music and views. And one of the speakers tonight was shot at by ICE for drawing. This webinar is going to give you the tools to exercise your rights, and specifically rights when documenting and recording law enforcement encounters. Exercising our constitutional right to document and record ICE and other federal agents is more important than ever. We must continue to bear witness to what is happening, and you have the right to do so. We have a right to freely express our political opinions without fear of censorship and violence. And extending our First Amendment right and exercising our First Amendment rights continues to be a vital way to push back against this authoritarianism and the terror and harm we are witnessing. Courage is contagious. Fear only works if we let it. Our power comes from refusing to be isolated and to be silent. The truth is simple. They wouldn't be trying so hard to shut people up and shut people down if our voices didn't matter. I'm going to now pass on to Isabelle Bourman, an artist who has been drawing the rise of ICE terror in the courts and on the streets, and was recently shot with a non-lethal round by a federal agent that went right through her drawing board while documenting ICE clashes in Minneapolis. Over to you, Isabelle.
Thank you, Dread. Hi, my name is Isabelle Bourman. I'm an interdisciplinary artist, and I've been working on an ongoing portrait of the American justice system for nearly 5 years. I've been playing with the traditional role of the courtroom artist to access and create art out of chaotic political and legal theaters. What began as a journey into high-profile trials, including the trial of Depp v. Heard, victim impact statements in Danny Masterson, The People versus Danny Masterson, The People of New York v. the NRA, and the successive Trump trials preceding his second election, is now a story about the dissolution of the legal process altogether. Beginning in July of last year, I've been documenting the immigration courts in New York, where ICE agents have been stationed in hallways and grabbing people without explanation. I've followed families into routine check-ins who were scheduled for a hearing by an immigration judge, and their exit into the halls, they would find a new courtroom that was being operated by masked agents with lists of individuals they were to detain. Some of them were asylum seekers who had brought the judge death certificates of family members from the country they had fled, and their loved ones had been assaulted trying to get answers as to where they were going. As the deportation campaign has evolved, so has my practice. I began traveling to sanctuary cities that had become targets of surge operations. Instead of tedious legal proceedings, I found myself on the front lines, emergency hearings, TROs, protests outside of detention facilities, car crashes from ICE chasing observers, and above all, I've been drawing an unrecognizable country, constitutional violations galore, and as a credentialed member of the press and a citizen, I have been on the receiving end of DHS's obsessive use of force. I can say that the tactics have patterns, but those patterns continue to escalate. I went to Chicago and then to the Twin Cities of Minnesota, where instead of wearing court outfits, I was in a gas mask. Instead of being told I could not draw in a courtroom, I was shot at with rubber bullets. At the crime scene of Alex Preddy that day, federal officers were indiscriminately firing chemical and riot control weapons at a crowd of civilians and members of the press. Unprovoked, one aimed and shot at my head. The rubber bullet missed me because I'm quick on my feet, and instead it punctured my drawing board. I'm just going to drop that video in the chat. This is really an accountability crisis as well. There's an outpouring of agents into our cities and neighborhoods, but the people and press, especially in Minnesota, organize to keep track of their neighbors and patrol their cities at great, as we have seen, even fatal risk to their lives. Art is about making your own choices, trusting in your own choices. It can be elusive or as direct as you want it to be. My work builds an atmosphere based on a dramatic tension, but it doesn't spell anything out. It's a feeling and it's an attempt made visual. I've noticed that my presence drawing ice creates an element of confusion that sometimes brings a person out of their uniform or conversely antagonizes officers. The point is that an officer's reaction should not override the rule of law. It is also just a symbol of proof outside of official reports. Over to you, Byul.
Thanks, Isabelle. Hi, everyone. My name is Byul, and I work with the ACLU's Speech, Privacy, and Technology Project, where I fight to protect the First Amendment rights of grassroots activists and organizers. And I'm really honored to be here tonight with you all to talk specifically about your right to record immigration and law enforcement. And tonight we're going to be sharing general information about the law and your rights, but this is not legal advice specific to any individual situation. That's something that you would want to consult a lawyer with individually for. So let's get into it. Next slide, please. Okay. The First Amendment protects your right to photograph or film anything plainly visible in public, and that includes immigration and law enforcement, so long as you're not trespassing or violating a lawful order. So if you're in public and you see ICE, you are legally allowed to record them. Put another way, recording immigration and law enforcement officers in public is not a crime, and so they can't arrest you or punish you for that alone. But you should make sure not to physically interfere with an officer because the First Amendment does not protect interference or obstruction or breaking an otherwise lawful order. So we'll talk about this more later, but maintaining a reasonable distance from the officers also reduces their ability to falsely claim you were interfering or obstructing their operations, which we have seen. And so we'll get more into that later about how to reduce those risks. And you should also note that on private property, the owner can set rules about photography or video. Next slide, please. If an officer demands to see your phone or tries to take it from you, remember that they need a warrant to lawfully do so. So if you're not under arrest, law enforcement officers need a warrant signed by a judge to confiscate your phone without your consent. So let me say that again. If they do not have a warrant signed by a judge, they cannot lawfully take your phone without your consent. And if you are arrested, then they still need a warrant to search your phone's contents. And the government, under no circumstances, can delete your data. Next slide, please. Okay, so while you do have a right to record law enforcement in public places, there are some important limitations that you want to keep in mind here. The First Amendment doesn't protect you from prosecution for civil disobedience, even if your motivation is law enforcement accountability or sharing law enforcement abuses with the public. So that means you can still be subject to punishment for breaking otherwise valid laws, even if you do so while you're recording or filming them. So, for example, many states have hands-free driving laws that make it illegal to have your phone in your hand when you're driving. And so, in that case, if you're recording ICE from behind the wheel while you're driving, you could still be pulled over or cited for breaking that law. And remember that if you're obstructing or physically interfering with their operations, you could be arrested and punished for that, even if you're doing so while you're recording or to express yourself. And also, as a side note, since we're talking about recording, some states do have two-party consent laws that would apply in private interactions. So when you're thinking about your right to record, you might just want to keep that in mind for private interactions. But generally, if you're in a public place and you see law enforcement or ICE, you are allowed to record them under the First Amendment. Next slide, please. So there's still going to be risks while you're documenting today. So even though you have a right to record immigration law enforcement, that doesn't mean that it doesn't still carry a certain level of risk because the Trump administration is repeatedly disregarding fundamental First Amendment principles, and many officers are still retaliating against people who record them. So some agents might react harshly to people who are recording their activities by threatening you, by making arrests, or worse. And even though that kind of retaliation is an illegal violation of your constitutional rights, the fact that it's a violation can protect you from prosecution and punishment if it gets to a judge, but that's still a really painful and draining process to have to go through a battle like that. And the agents might also respond with physical force. So they might pull out their guns, they might spray chemical irritants, they might even assault people. And your physical safety and the safety of those around you and the person being targeted or detained is a top priority. So we're going to talk more later about some ways to reduce those risks, but there's really no way that we can say you can eliminate them. Next slide, please. So some people are also curious about alerting people to ICE presence. So the First Amendment generally protects sharing information about law enforcement officers, what they're doing in public and where they're doing it, so long as you're not obstructing or interfering with them doing their jobs or specifically intending to help someone evade law enforcement. So some people might share information about immigration or police presence by using their voice, by texting in group chats, by posting on social media, and some people might use instruments like whistles. And the First Amendment protects communication that's intended to alert the community to the presence of law enforcement as it impacts all people. Oftentimes people will do this because they want to summon people who are willing to come out and document in the hope of deterring abuse and holding ICE officers accountable. Some people might want to warn vulnerable and risk-averse neighbors of the threat of excessive force and harassment and wrongful arrests. And some people might want to alert parents to wish to shield children from the trauma of witnessing law enforcement activity. And there's no court decision specifically about whistling, but we have no reason to think that it would be analyzed differently than other means of communication, like posting on social media or texting a group chat. But this hasn't been legally tested in the courts, so this is just what our understanding is of the current law. Next slide, please. But no matter what means of communication you're using, it's important to keep in mind that the First Amendment doesn't protect expression that actually obstructs or interferes with law enforcement or is specifically intended to help a particular person or group of people evade law enforcement. So you should also remain aware of relevant regulations like noise and traffic ordinances, which can also be validly enforced against you. And once again, the Trump administration has been retaliating against people even when they're lawfully exercising their First Amendment rights. And so you should keep that in mind as you determine what level of risk is right for you. Now I'm going to pass it to Jonathan to tell us more about ways to reduce risks while you're recording immigration and law enforcement.
Thank you so much, Byul. I'm John Blazer with the ACLU's National Office. Next slide, please. I'm going to share some practices that tend to reduce risk, but to be clear, as Byul noted, and I think as we heard from Isabelle, even if you're following all these rules, as we've tragically seen over and over again, we can't eliminate all risks. We can only control our behavior. We do what we can to keep as safe as possible, but we can't control how law enforcement responds always. But try to keep in mind that safety and de-escalation is a priority along with exercising rights. And here's some other tips that can help you reduce risks. You want to maintain distance. A good rule of thumb would be stay enough steps away that the officer would have to affirmatively walk towards you to be in physical contact with you. You want to avoid sudden movements and remain calm if you can. If the officers become violent, try to remain calm and allow your footage to speak for itself. If you're narrating, focus on facts such as the time of day and the number of agents. For safety reasons, we recommend not recording while driving. Some potential alternatives are, of course, to have the passenger record or to use a dash cam. Film openly if you're filming and try to keep your hands visible. Follow instructions, document yourself complying, and if you feel comfortable and safe, do that documentation of yourself complying while you continue to film. And never physically resist or obstruct, and try not to do anything that could be misinterpreted in that way, because if you leave it open to misinterpretation, officers will take advantage of that. All right, I want to invite Cassils on with me. There you are. Hi, Cassils. Let's practice some of what we've learned by taking a look at two different ways to exercise your rights when dealing with an officer who responds angrily to you filming them, as officers often do. I'm going to play the role of a cop. Somebody has to play that role. Who is cuffing somebody after ordering them to the ground for arrest. And Cassils, you are going to play the role of an observer who is recording the encounter. I'd like you to see these two ways of doing this and compare what looks different and with what level of effectiveness. So here is version 1. Scene. Step back.
I have the First Amendment right to film ICE.
Back away.
I said I had the right to document ICE.
I said back away.
Hey, that's my phone. I was recording.
Not anymore, you're not. Scene. Okay. Let's try that again, Cassils. I'm going to take a different approach and take a look at what Cassils does differently and with what result. Scene. Back away.
Okay, officer.
I said back away.
Okay, officer. I'm backing away.
Scene. All right. So in both scenarios, Cassils was exercising their right to record immigration officers operating in public. And from a legal standpoint, the Constitution arguably protects them from criminal prosecution for recording in both of those cases. But you may have noticed some key differences in how they handled the officers' angry commands. In the first scene, Cassils focused upon arguing. And you know what? The Constitution protects your right to argue with officers if you want to. But it can sometimes escalate a situation and interfere with your ability to exercise your other rights and put yourself and others in danger. In the second scene, Cassils simply exercised their rights while also de-escalating, and the results that they achieved seemed a little bit more effective, while also reducing risks. I want to reiterate the fact that federal agents killed Alex Preddy while he was out in the streets to record their conduct, and that just shows you. And they shot a less lethal weapons at Isabelle Bourman, who was out there sketching. So these are dangerous situations. These practices reduce risks, but don't eliminate all risks. Let's turn back to the slide deck to talk about some best practices while recording. It's important to capture as many details as you can, and that means any documents that the agents produce, any weapons that they are carrying, badges, uniforms, street signs, landmarks, any other cameras present. Try not to stop recording between shots if you can help it. After filming, make a copy of the footage on another device and don't edit the file name. If you do edit the footage, do so from a copy. This will help the original stand up as evidence in court. And finally, share the footage with the victim's family or attorney if you can figure that out, the victim's name and their attorney, so that they can decide if and how to release the footage, and they have some control over the matter. Next slide. Many of us participate in local rapid response networks that rely upon people reporting information to hotlines or text chains to alert the community of the danger of ICE enforcement and to encourage people to come out and witness what is occurring. And I just want to share with you kind of a very helpful mnemonic that many of these rapid response networks are using as they train individuals on how to document. And the point here of this mnemonic salute is to get people focusing on the essential facts. And focusing on the facts helps to share relevant information rather than spreading fear and panic with more general information. So just to walk through real quick, the S is for size. So how big is the deployment of officers? How many cars? A is for actions. What are they actually doing? L is for location and get as specific as possible. U is for the uniform they're wearing, which can give you some clues as to what agency they work for, although it gets to be very confusing when they're masking themselves, they're hiding their ID. When ICE is wearing sometimes flak jackets with police emblazoned on the back, it can make it very confusing, but still, if you reported that the officers are in plain clothes with a flak jacket marked DHS, that helps provide some information. The time and the date, that's T for time and date. And finally, any equipment and weapons that you see the officers carrying. And again, when you get specific, rather than sending out a general signal like, there's an ICE raid in Philadelphia. If I'm in Philadelphia and I hear that information, then I can panic wherever I am and I'm not sure what to do with that information rather than sending out the specifics of the location. Next slide, please. Communities around the country have been holding rallies and vigils to protest ICE enforcement and other abuses of power. And it's a good moment to remind ourselves of the importance of assessing our personal risk tolerance and of creating a safety plan. And some elements of that safety plan are to go with somebody if you can, find a protest buddy who has a similar risk tolerance to you, to go with an emergency contact, to have identified your exit points, your meeting points, and to know who the event organizers are and the people who are serving safety roles in the event if they are designated. And of course, we also recommend using a marker to write important phone numbers on your body in the event that you're arrested, whether or not you go to an event thinking that that's a possibility or not, excuse me. Next slide. Finally, we'll talk about some ways to protect your privacy when you're at a protest. Our privacy experts could do a whole training just on this, but here are a few tips that help protect your privacy while participating at protests. Number one, turn off all biometric unlock functions like fingerprint or facial recognition technology. Communicate with others over encrypted messaging apps like Signal. Put your phone on airplane mode. And now I think, Byul, we have maybe a couple of minutes for questions and answers if any questions came in through the chat. I haven't been following it closely enough. Do we have some questions?
Feel free to drop your questions in the chat.
And if we don't, we can move on and see if there's time at the end. I'll leave that up to Dread.
There are questions coming in now. The first question I see is Signal the best encrypted app?
I don't know. Byul, do you?
I can't give an authoritative answer to that, but I will say that that's what I use.
Another
Here's a good
question.
one for you, Buell. How far away should we stay from ICE officers? And let me ask you, is there a clear legal rule about the number of feet that you must maintain from a police officer or an ICE officer?
That's a great question. There's no bright line rule legally for how far away you need to be from an officer while you record. There are, unless you live in a state where there's a specific law that might say you have to be 20, you have to back up 25 feet from the officer if they tell you to. But if you live in a state without that kind of law, there's no specific distance legally. But as John mentioned earlier, a good rule of thumb could be staying enough steps away from the agent or the officer that they would have to turn towards you. They would have to physically come towards you to be in contact with you, and that's going to reduce any sort of likelihood that they can argue that you were interfering or obstructing, which is a common line that we hear from them.
Great. I see a question that I can answer. It's nice to see something you can answer. The question was, do I have to identify myself to police? And I put in the chat an excellent resource from our good friends at the Immigrant Legal Resource Center that lists stop and identify laws that exist in most states, or maybe about half of all states. There are states in which if a law enforcement officer, now not ICE, local police or state police, has a reasonable suspicion to lawfully stop you because they suspect you of committing a crime, then they can ask you to identify your name, and in some states, your name and your address, and in some states, your name and your identification. And it is an offense in those states that have these laws to not provide your name or that information if you're being stopped lawfully because there is a suspicion that you are committing a crime. So the important thing there is look in that chart and see if your state has one of those laws or not, or if you're traveling to another state or protesting in another state, it's good to look to see what the local laws are in that respect. Buell, do you see one more question that we can take before moving on?
Let's see. I'm seeing a lot of questions that we could have entire sessions on about like arts venues and protecting them specifically from raids. I think we won't want to get into that today. But let's see.
Yeah, I think we can move on. And I'm sorry for those who had questions that we didn't answer, but we only answer stuff that we feel like we know the answer to.
Great. Okay. Well, I'll speak next. Hi, everyone. Thank you to Follow Freedom and to the ACLU for convening this urgent call. And really thank all of you for showing up tonight with your open hearts, ready to take action. My name is Cassils, and I'm a transgender visual and performance artist creating in a time where trans bodies and identities are being erased through a combination of legal, administrative, legislative, and social tactics aimed at removing legal recognition, historical presence, and public visibility. As a trans artist, I am part of the continuum of disenfranchised and oppressed communities who work in solidarity to liberate ourselves from systems and regimes that deny us our humanity. We meet a moment of deep pain and outrage. Across this country, immigrant communities are not only living with fear of assault and imprisonment, they're also enduring and witnessing deadly violence. In Minneapolis last month, as been already discussed, Renee Good and Alex Preddy were shot dead with encounters with ICE and Border Patrol. And the deaths of these witnesses, our allies, as well as many hidden deaths of immigrant detention and the deaths from causes other than gunfire, shock the conscientiousness of this nation. And these are not isolated events. They are part of an escalating campaign of authoritarian brutality.
Hi, good evening, y'all. My name is Rafa Esparze, and I'm an artist based here in Los Angeles. And last summer here in Los Angeles, we experienced the violence of ICE ravage our city, our immigrant neighbors terrorized, our families traumatized, and fear spreading everywhere people gather to work, to live, to create, and be in community. But art can push back. On July 4th of 2020, Cassils and I, along with our team of collaborators, launched In Plain Sight, a nationwide activist art initiative created in response to immigrant detention and mass incarceration in the US. The project mobilized around 80 artists to transform the sky into a site of protest. Fleets of planes used skywriting technology to write urgent and defiant messages such as "Care not cages," "Chinga tu migra," and "Abolish ICE," indexically above hidden detention centers, courthouses, former sites of incarceration, and border regions. By placing these statements in public airspace, visible yet fleeting, the project confronted viewers with the realities of state violence that are often hidden from public view. The activist importance of In Plain Sight lies in its strategy of visibility and collective action. It disrupted patriotic holiday airspace with calls for abolition and migrant justice, reframing Independence Day as a moment to question who freedom is truly for. The project extended beyond spectacle as an interactive digital map, provided information about incarceration sites, and connected audiences to grassroots organizations, encouraging tangible civic engagement, as well as funding immigrant bail bonds. Rather than symbolic protest alone, In Plain Sight took the lead from immigrant justice organizers and organizations to function as a coordinated, coalition-based intervention, bridging art, activism, and community organizing. It demonstrated how contemporary art can operate as a tool of resistance, public education, and solidarity, insisting that what is in plain sight can no longer be ignored.
And since 2020, things have only intensified. The victims of this violence are not abstract statistics. They are our relatives, our neighbors, our colleagues, our friends. And with each life lost, the anguish echoes through family homes, through workplaces, and in our classrooms. We cannot and we must not look away. This moment demands more than just passive outrage. It demands that we show up for one another in person, in peace, full of courage, full of creativity, determination, and love. So if you're able to step forward and you're not at risk at deportation, we're asking you to consider taking action today, not later, but today.
Because while federal power might be vast, our collective presence is powerful, especially when it is rooted in care, accountability, and unity. Our love is stronger than their hate. Our unity is louder than their fear. Let our actions continue to reflect who we really are, people of conscience, a people united, bound together by our struggles to live dignified lives. As artists, we honor the memories of folks killed by ICE and the many others who have died by doing what they stood for, in solidarity, with courage, and for justice. Thank you all for your time, your heart, and your commitment. I wanted to take a moment to encourage everyone to continue to be present, to be critical witnesses in these tough moments, to be creative thinkers, and to continue to be courageous and to be loving. Muchas gracias and thank you. I'll now turn it over to Patirsse Cullors to share about her work as an artist, an author, educator, activist, and organizer.
Thank you so much, Rafa. It's so good to be here. Hi, Cassils and Dread and the whole team, ACLU. Thank you for creating these kinds of spaces in this moment. This is really scary times. And I think the more we can gather together and create spaces where we can remember our courage, the more we can exercise our constitutional rights. We can exercise healing in real time as we face one of the most traumatic moments in this timeline. My name is Patirsse Cullors. I'm an artist, an abolitionist. I'm from Los Angeles, California. And art shapes our reality, culture, our laws, and policy. And the current culture we are living in is an aesthetic that is centering carcerality and punishment. As the first city here in LA that was impacted by ICE and the National Guard, we have witnessed the onslaught of the federal government and its impact on undocumented communities, their allies, but also its impact on community leaders. We are not just up against ICE. We are up against the DHS, we are up against the FBI, and we are up against the DOJ, being used as MAGA's retributive arm. And we have to figure out how we're going to show up in this moment. And When I saw the call from Fall of Freedom just months ago, I was like, of course, it's going to be the artists that try to gather us together in this time. We are in a constitutional crisis, and we have to use our civil liberties, or I fear we will lose them. I think a lot about the way that art and culture shapes healing, shapes reality, shapes what we do. In 2017, a group of us built 100 jail beds. This was a massive public art project where we worked alongside ACLU here in Southern California, alongside other grassroots organizations. And we built these beds to bring them out to the County Board of Supervisors as they were trying to move forward on building a $3.5 billion jail in Los Angeles. And these beds symbolized our loved ones. It symbolized our stolen dreams. And part of the conversation we wanted to have with the public was these jail beds are usually hidden behind concrete and hidden behind cages. We wanted to bring them out to the public. Much of my art practice is making what is painful and traumatic public and giving it a place to have alchemy and healing. And through that activation, the jail bed drop is what we called it, launched by Justice LA, a coalition of 30 organizations here in Los Angeles County and across the country. We eventually stopped the $3.5 billion jail from being built. If we weren't on Zoom, everybody would be clapping right now and we'd be like, yes, a victory. But I bring this particular art project up because we have an opportunity right now to be our most creative selves in the face of fascism, our most creative selves in the face of authoritarianism. And we have the opportunity to aestheticize abolition right now through care, through an imaginary that isn't shaped by supremacy. And I long for our ability to build a world where safety and belonging is centered through the lens of care. And I believe we can do that right now. And I think we're doing it right now. I have so much faith and hope in our ability to know better in this moment and to show up better in this moment and to call on each other, whether it's artists and educators, elected officials, our community members. It's going to take all of us to stop this mass onslaught of terror in our lives and our communities. I'm going to now turn it over to Cannupa. Thank you so much, everybody.
Docha Managua, Dishkagna Hudosha, Nitaway Hudosha. My name is Cannupa Hanska Luger. I'm an enrolled member of the 3 affiliated tribes, Mandan, Hidatsa, Rikra. I'm also Lakota. I was born on the Standing Rock Reservation in North Dakota. I'm an artist, I'm a writer working across sculpture, performance, and film, and much of my practice is rooted in social collaboration, working with communities to visualize data, relate indigenous knowledge systems, and communicate lived experiences in ways that move us towards a shared understanding. Indigenous people are not strangers to having our rights stripped from us. The models of control and state power currently being implemented in this country were, in part, developed through the attempted genocide of Native nations across Turtle Island. We know this history not as a theory, but as a lived experience to pass through generations. Because of that, I stand in solidarity with all communities facing government-sanctioned violence in whatever ways I am able. I continue to use my platform as an artist to advocate for the dismantling of systems that do not serve collective survival, dignity, or justice. One artwork that feels especially relevant to this movement is the Mirror Shield project. It was an open source project that I initiated about a decade ago in 2016 in support of water protectors at Oceti Shikoe Camp in Standing Rock, North Dakota. I created a tutorial video and shared it across social media, inviting people to make mirrored shields for frontline activation. People from across the country created and sent shields to frontline. And since then, the project has been adapted and used as creative resistant movements globally. The design is intentionally simple and accessible. Reflective vinyl adhered to plywood for safety and durability. using materials people can find in their garages or at local hardware stores. The goal was to create something anyone could build, something community driven, something that could help protect people standing on the front lines for land, water, and human rights. The mirrored shield was also existed within a much older human story. In many cultures, cultural cosmologies, reflective shields appear as tools of protection and transformation. In Western mythology, Perseus used the mirrored shield to defeat Medusa. In our current moment, and over the past decade since the project was developed, the mirrored shield becomes a way of confronting modern monsters. Extractive industry, unchecked capitalism, systems that prioritize profit over life. I created this project as an open source because the technology of protection belongs to all of us. It is a continuation of collective knowledge moving through time. If people are interested in using this project in their own communities, I've shared simple visual instructions linked to my social media so that work can remain accessible and community driven. This is yours. Art is essential in moments of state violence because it's a language that moves across barriers. Art can communicate urgency, humanity, and resistance in ways policy and statistics cannot. It allows us to broadcast truth, create symbols people can gather around, and build solidarity across geography, culture, and language. Art also reminds us of our agency. It creates space for people to see themselves not only as victims of systems, but as participants in shaping the future. In times of violence, art helps us hold memory, build community, and imagine futures beyond survival. Futures rooted in relationship, accountability, and care for each other and the land. And right now, the act of imagining something better is not optional. It is necessary. I will now turn it over to Favianna Rodriguez, artist, activist, organizer, and co-founder of the Center for Cultural Power, a national woman of color artist-led organization designed to inspire media and culture makers to imagine and help build a world where power is distributed equitably. Thank you.
Thank you, Cannupa. Hi, everyone. My name is Favianna Rodriguez. I am joining you from Ohlone Territory, also known as Oakland, California. I am an interdisciplinary artist and an institution builder and a cultural strategist. And I want to ask all of you, when I say the words immigration policy, what do you think about? Do you think about border walls? Do you think about detention centers and the targeting of Black and brown people? Or do you think about heroes? Do you think about the courage that it takes to cross a border? Do you think about the fact that all living things migrate, butterflies, birds, and that people have been migrating since the beginning of time? It is human beings who have criminalized migration. The earth knows no borders. We are in a moment of a narrative war. We are in a moment of culture war. The extremists use two groups to mobilize their base. They target immigrants and they target trans people. And so the wave of anti-trans and anti-migrant legislation that we're seeing now, it's not new, but it's to another extreme. What the white supremacists, the white nativists have been doing since the 90s is preparing the ground for something like this. The anti-immigrant narrative has grown. When we see the word used of calling a human being illegal, the fact that the US-Mexico border got militarized. This is a project that is 30 years in the making. And the way that our opposition has won is that they have successfully dehumanized immigrants. They have criminalized immigrants. They have popularized narratives that makes Americans believe that immigrants are challenging American sovereignty, when in reality, it's the billionaires who are challenging all our sovereignty, including our bodily sovereignty. So what we have to know as artists is that this is a narrative war, and we have to fight with cultural tools. We can't just react to dominant messages. We can't just say F ICE or ICE out. We actually need to propose a vision for the future where immigrants thrive. We have to show immigrants as heroes. We have to be able to say Migration is beautiful. Migration is natural, and we are a part of nature, and we are nature. And so as artists, I really invite you to think about what beyond what's politically feasible, because cultural change precedes political change. And any policies that we're going to win, we are going to win through culture first. So artists, be bold, be imaginative. We need your futurism. We need your comedy, your sexiness. We need to take back the narrative and remind people that migrants are human beings and that culture is power. Thank you so much, everyone.
Well, thank you, Favianna, and for everybody. We're just about to wrap up. But I do want to say that 85 years ago today, the U.S. government signed Executive Order 9066, which in turn imprisoned and led to the imprisonment of the Japanese Americans in this country. So while there are particularities to what's going on now with ICE rounding up migrants and criminalizing them, and the fascism that's descending on us, there is also a continuum. The country is currently horrified by the abuses committed by ICE and the broader consolidation of fascism. Fall of Freedom is part of challenging this and changing it. We are determined to create cultural resistance. Our expression is our action. We hope you will all take part on May 1st. We want you to start planning your event now, and go to our website. Will be more information soon about registering your event so you can be part of our national map. There is a link that's going to be posted again in the chat to go to our website. It's just falloffreedom.com. We are going to have a map which, like last time, promoted and popularized all the events that were happening. And we're hoping to have double the amount of events that we had last time. Last time we had 700. We would love to have all 50 states participate, and there'd be like 1,500 events on May 1st, and double that again for October 2nd and 3rd. That will show that courage is contagious, and we are a contagion that's spreading. Thank you to the ACLU for giving us a deeper understanding of training in our rights. Let's go use them. I want to hand it briefly back to John, and then I will wrap up and close out in just a few seconds.
Thank you, Dread. Artists, creatives, thank you again for taking the time to join this call, learn about your rights, and be willing to do your part to protect communities and rein in ICE and Border Patrol. Your voice, your art, your actions really matter. When we turn intimidation into momentum, we change the calculus. It can feel daunting to speak out in the face of threats, but other nonviolent movements have shown us that we have to do this. This is what keeps us safer in the long run and what best protects our rights. And I just want to say we share your outrage in this moment, and so much respect and commend the bravery you're showing and continuing to take action despite these risks. I want to point your attention to a couple of actions that we would really love you to join us with right now that are very timely. Last week, the Senate blocked a DHS funding bill that would have sent even more money to ICE and CBP without any real accountability. And the fact that some of our elected officials had the courage finally to block this spending is proof that the pressure that we're putting on them is starting to work. And your continued outreach to them is essential if we want them to do the right thing. So in the chat, we are going to put a couple of links for a petition and an action that can enable you to call your senators. Please call your senators, share your name, let them know that you are a constituent and an artist, and tell them not a penny more for ICE brutality without accountability. And sign the petition calling on Congress to end these reckless immigration raids and to oppose any bill that expands ICE's already massive budget. I'll hand it back to you, Dread, to close us out.
Well, thank you so much. I want to follow up with a call to action again. Please get involved by creating an event and taking part in the next Fall of Freedom nationwide action on May 1st. This happens with you. This is an invitation, whatever kind of art you do, whether you're a comedian, a theater maker, a visual artist, a singer, a musician, a street artist, whatever, any kind of art you do, a poet, a dancer, Any kind of art you do, you can be part of this. We are not curating this. We are not organizing it. We are inviting you to participate, and we want to highlight and uplift what you do. And collectively, us all acting on the same day is what will show a lot of our power. As the Trump administration doubles down on the fear and the force to intimidate communities and silence dissent, people across the country are showing up with courage, care, and compassion. Creativity, imagination, and peaceful people-led movements have always been how real change happens. Last year on November 21st and 22nd, Fall of Freedom had over 700 art activations. We are just getting started. Fall of Freedom makes clear that artists will not be intimidated, and that resolve is only growing. This is a dangerous moment for democracy and a powerful moment to come together, stand up for one another, and create and not capitulate, and to defend the freedoms that belong to all of us. So sign up and stay connected with the updates on the Fall of Freedom website and find the ways you can take action. I really, really deeply want to thank the ACLU, Jonathan and Byul, and also the other artists that showed up, Favianna, Isabelle, Cannupa, Patirsse, Cassils, Rafa, and everybody else on this call. It's really an honor to be in this fight for creative freedom and justice together. We are going to stop fascism, and you and we are all part of it together. Thank you so much for spending your evening with us.